I'm John Heilemann, and this is the Hell and High Water Podcast.
This week's guest, illusionist, performance artist, Derek DelGaudio. For those who haven't seen it, one of the elements of it is that audience members walk in the door and choose a card that has an identifier for how they see themselves, whether they take that seriously or not. I think you probably saw audience members who took, I think at one point you sort of indicate you want people who took it seriously versus people who didn't take it seriously, to kind of distinguish between themselves, because there's obviously some split. Some people who kind of look at that as picked a name, but I'm a seeker, I'm a joker, I'm a midnight toker, whatever, as a kind of a joke, and others who are looking for something that was more earnest.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to level the playing field. I mean, most people went into that room either not knowing who I was or knowing only what they've read in the playbill, or maybe they heard about it on, from a friend or something like that. But I knew I wanted to make it so that if they were going to start defining me before I even saw them, it was a two-way street. I wanted them to flatten themselves to being one thing, so that we met on equal ground the first time we saw each other face to face. And so I wanted to start that dialogue before they even, got into the room, get them in that headspace of thinking about, who am I? Who do I think I am? How do I think others see me? How do I want to be seen? How do I want to be perceived in this world? And so that was just a way to get them to start thinking about it before I ever said a word.
I remember Colbert, in some later thing, Stephen, who ends up being an executive producer of the movie, he sees we played at the beginning. He saw you on stage, loved it, became a backer, became an executive producer, helped this thing helped the Hulu special get made. When you hear Stephen say that he thinks that your piece, that in and of itself is very much of this moment, what does that mean to you? When you hear that, you think, yeah, it really is of this moment. In what ways? Is that resonant for you when you hear him say that?
Well, I experienced it in real time, in that the show was different when I started than where it ended up. And I started it in 2015 before the election, or that's when I started writing it. And then 2016 came and I started doing it. And so I was doing the show when the election came around. And then after the election, moved to New York and started doing it in New York, and again, experienced it in different waves. And how people came to the work varied depending on what was going on in the world. And the real moment that it became very clear was after Charlottesville, where the people started, what they chose at the wall when they first walked in changed like the next day. And there was no more, unicorn. There was no more, space cowboy. It was people, for whatever reason, realized that what we call ourselves and what we call each other matters. Really, really matters. And how we choose to identify ourselves and put labels on one another is life or death. It's not just, I don't want to be called that. It's what we call each other has absolute consequences. And that just became clear in the relation with the world. I had a small sample of people every night that I got to interact with, and this concept of what we call ourselves and how we choose to divide ourselves is everything, and how we identify and what we identify with and with whom we identify is everything. And it's how we're shaping this country, and it's how we shape our circles. And so maybe that's what he was referring to, is that, like, unless we find a way to look beyond these labels and these words that we've chosen to categorize ourselves, we might be fucked. You've been covering politics for long enough where you've seen the meaning of the words Democrat and Republican change from time to time, what that actually means, and how, what progressive actually means definitely shifts and changes, and what conservative means changes. But like, we have never seen such a stark, I think, an immediate change of these titles, where it happens before our eyes, where what it meant to be a Republican, with George W. Bush, and how I or others felt about that word then versus now. I mean, we are seeing how quickly and how powerfully we can transform the meaning of a thing, and by changing the meaning of a label, we change the meaning of an entire community and how we perceive that community, not just the individual, but what it means for that entire group of now when someone identifies as a Republican, it says a lot more than it did to me several years ago. And
yes,
and it's really, really tragic.
Yeah, and I guess 100%. And I've got to get, it takes you into, we could again go down a whole bunch of different paths here. One of which is, I think about, those identifiers on that wall and people walking in and choosing something.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have sort of, the notion that part of what in and of itself is about the complexity of identity, and about no one thing being your identity never being able to be reduced to a single thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part of the message of the work, and yet you have as a kind of, you make an explicit move to like make people choose one word. There's a paradoxical element to that,
yeah.
Especially at the end of the show where you go through and name people according to what they've chosen.
One of the joys of that experience in that moment is the moment before I say something, when you're wondering yourself, what is this person, how does this person see themselves? And when a black guy chose Republican, no one saw that answer coming. So when I say it and he confirms it, it's a reckoning for all of us, and and that is one of the many reckonings that this country is going through right now, where we are having revealed to us in real time daily these contradictions and paradoxes and entanglements that we've created for ourselves, and that we cannot just remove people. We cannot just demand that people separate themselves from their beliefs and who they are and their value systems. We have to find ways of existing, together and coexisting with those beliefs. But the least we can do is decide on what it means to tell the truth.
Derek DelGaudio, the man, the myth, the legend, presiding genius behind in and of itself an amoral man, or amoral man. However, they're supposed to say it both ways. That's a contingent title, a title that could kind of tie it, just like this conversation we were just having, could say it either way, and it works.
Yep.
Thank you for taking the time today to be on Hell and High Water. If you haven't seen the movie on Hulu, I gotta say, by this point, if you still haven't seen it,
wow,
time to I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you. Go watch it right now. It'll blow your mind. Derek, thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks for watching. You can watch the full episode of Hell and High Water on the Recount streaming daily, or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.